This is the WGNS Action Line, talking with Rutherford County newsmakers about what matters most to you. Now, your host, Scott Walker.
We have Dr. Christopher Lombardi from Ascension St. Thomas, Rutherford. Tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into the medical field.
Well, good morning, Scott. Thanks for having me. My background, I actually started out as an arts major. So I went to NYU, got a Bachelor of Fine Arts. But my family is mostly in medicine. My father has had a very long-standing, high-risk OBGYN practice here, perinatal group. And my wife is an OB nurse, so I was just always surrounded by it. And I really got to see, when we would go out, patients come up who happened to know, say, my dad, and just voice their appreciation for what an impact he had made on their lives. And I always thought, boy, that probably feels good to have that happen to you. So after I graduated, I went to University of Louisville, and I got my post-bac degree in pre-med, and then stayed on for med school, and then did a residency in psychiatry.
So psychiatry, that has got to be one of the more interesting fields. I mean, really anything in medicine is interesting, but psychiatry especially.
It is. It's all over the media now. There's such an awareness of the importance of mental health, which is great, because I think for a long time there was a certain stigma attached to it. So I think people are just much more comfortable talking about whatever they're going through and getting some help.
Even 10 years ago, there was a big difference as far as how people looked at different functions of the brain or different mental disorders or really any of those things. But it has changed a lot.
It has. The science continues to progress. We have even treatments now that are actually based upon science and studies that, functional MRIs, things like, TMS machines, that we've been able to make some pretty significant strides in treating depression at the source.
Are you able to see on imaging depression within the brain? Are you able to see different characteristics and how it unfolds within the brain?
Yes, to some degree. With the functional MRIs, you can actually see changes in glucose metabolism in the left hypofrontal part of your brain. So, that was one big breakthrough that the field had. But, I like to say one of my mentors in residency said, we're really treating life. And we are. So there's a science to it, but, there's a real human component to it, too. And we're very complicated creatures. And so sometimes it's not so much black and white as what's on imaging, and has a lot to do with what's going on in someone's life.
And I guess there's still so much unknown about the brain that, has yet to be discovered.
Yes, that's a whole new frontier that's still awaiting us.
This time of year, between Thanksgiving, between Christmas and the New Year's, what are some of the biggest issues that people face that you see?
Well, there are people who deal with depression year-round, but then there are also people who just tend to deal with depression during the season. There's actually a whole separate terminology for that, seasonal affective disorder.
And people call that, I guess, SAD for short.
Yeah, it's easy to remember.
Kind of makes sense.
Yeah, there's the winter blues, which, I don't know, they say up to maybe 20% of people experience, but that's different than SAD. SAD is really clinical depression. It just happens to occur mostly in late fall and winter.
And I guess there are a huge number of reasons why people experience this, but I'm sure one of them would be loss, because it does seem like a lot of people, they do pass away close to the holidays. And I don't know if it's because folks, they just know they want to hang on for that next Christmas, and then come New Year's, you'll see a loved one pass away who may be battling something like cancer or any number of conditions.
That human spirit to hold on, that's a very real thing. People will hold on to things that are important to them, things that they've been looking forward to, or at least, I think on some level, when they feel like their families are actually ready to let them go.
That's really wild, because you really do see, for example, if you look at the obituaries, they tend to slow down a little bit before Christmas, and then after, they really do pick up.
And that's one thing that can also make it hard for families, especially the following season after you've lost somebody.
How do you go about deciphering, is it seasonal affective disorder, or is it long-term depression, or is it something else?
Probably the biggest clue is that it would tend to kind of resolve or remit as you get into spring. So if you tend to be somebody who does pretty well, through spring and summer and most of fall, and then you just notice a recurring pattern of getting depressed towards the winter, that's usually a pretty good indicator of what you're dealing with.
What are some of the biggest issues that people do face whenever they are going through really any type of depression? And then what do people face when they're going through seasonal affective disorder?
I am the behavioral health director for the Ascension St. Thomas Regionals. We have hospitals out in Rutherford and Woodbury and DeKalb. We also have a partnership with Acadia, and that's a joint venture for the Nashville Behavioral Health Hospital. So you can see things really to those extremes where someone is so depressed that, in fact, maybe they are unable to take care of themselves or, in fact, God forbid, even are suicidal. You can be dealing with something as serious as that, and then sort of, the middle of the road depression where people are still functional, they're not going to hurt themselves. However, they're very unhappy and it's starting to impact their life. And then, sort of on the milder end, you have the winter blues, where people just feel a bit down. And treatments are different for each sort of step along those ways, And we can get into all that, but it can be something as simple as mindfulness and exercise, and then something as significant as hospitalization.
Like you were saying, there's a wide variety of treatment available, but with treatment, let's say it is something as simple as, hey, look, you need to get out, exercise, go walking every day, just do something other than sitting at home. But with that avenue, that approach, how quickly will things start to resolve or feel better?
Exercise is as powerful as any medication. And when someone who hasn't been maybe exercising or eating right or getting outside enough starts doing those things, you can start to see an improvement in their mood even within 2 to 3 weeks.
I think most people will acknowledge, hey, I feel better when it's nice and sunny outside versus dark and gloomy out there and cold.
Oh, absolutely. The sort of overcast gray skies, that can definitely increase your risk of seasonal affective disorder. How far away from the equator you live can also affect your risk. So, the sunlight is very important.
Hey, I can see where being outside exercising in the sunlight would make a huge difference versus even exercising inside the house.
And that light, talking about how important that is, one of the other treatments for SAD is actual light box therapy. And so there's ones people can find on Amazon, and there's more medical grade ones, but just basically placing one of those light boxes, about 20 inches from your face, 20 minutes a day, can significantly improve your depression.
Is this the same as the red lights? Because I hear a lot about the red light therapy, or is this something different from that?
This is very different than that.
Okay.
Yeah, and this tends to be more white light.
So this is something, I guess you could order this light on like Amazon or pick it up at stores even.
Yeah, there's some different recommendations. You can see a lot in the literature that doctors recommend, 10,000 lux. And a lot of the ones you get on Amazon tend to not be that powerful. But it's something that you can discuss with your PCP.
When you go some of the other avenues for treating depression, let's say, for example, medication, I know that takes a whole lot longer for the medicine to start really working. So if you go that route, what's the process there?
So the process is, you sit down with your primary care provider and you basically tell them what you're going through. And they're very well equipped to be able to treat you. You'll start by basically doing the history and see if you've been on any of those medications before. But an SSRI is pretty much the standard course of treatment. And there's another one we can talk about too. But once you start taking that, usually if you're having long anxiety, you can notice an improvement in that in a week or two. And depression usually takes about 3 to 4 to 5 weeks to start showing a response.
Anxiety is another one of those, problems that people face or have. And that one's probably just as tough to deal with if you're dealing with that separately or with depression, because if you have an anxiety attack, it can easily feel like you're having a heart attack or worse, and you're convinced that it is.
Absolutely. We deal with that all the time. And I think the emergency room physicians will tell you that too. So many patients come in with symptoms that are mimicking, say, a heart attack, like you said, and tests rule that out. And in fact, it just turns out to be, which is still serious actually, uncontrolled anxiety, because that can have a lot of downstream health consequences too.
For the person battling that anxiety or those anxiety attacks, I'm sure they're convinced when they walk into the ER, this is a heart attack. You can't tell me otherwise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes it's maybe not as reassuring as you would think for people to be told, well, it's really just anxiety, because sometimes they're still worried about something being missed. And also people have a very personal relationship with their mental health, if that makes sense. And we like to think we're in control of our faculties. And, when there are certain elements that are occurring that we feel like are out of our control, it can be very difficult to accept that.
And I'm sure if it's difficult to accept it, that can lead to a whole nother long list of problems, such as fear of medical problems or medical anxiety. I mean, it goes from one thing to another, doesn't it?
It does. And another thing to watch out for is substance abuse, particularly around the holiday season. So, it's one of those other things. If you notice that your mood is declining, if you notice that you're drinking more, or you're doing things that are not healthy for you, maybe time to reach out to somebody.
What's that first phone call that somebody should make or could make?
Well, the first phone call, at least is my experience with patients, is oftentimes friends or family. They want to just kind of say, hey, listen, I'm dealing with something. It's not always possible to tell. And I'm sure we know, people who are struggling with something. We thought, boy, I thought they looked happy. They looked like they were doing great. So that can be the first step. And then for the other half of people, it's talking to their doctor.
I think for some people who have had long-term depression or anxiety, a lot of them have gotten so good at faking that smile or faking that, hey, everything's all right. It's probably hard to open up once you actually sit down with a doctor.
It can be. People sometimes want to kind of minimize, even when they're asking for help, really the extent of what they're going through. I think there's sort of a protective factor. You want to feel, again, like you're really in control of your emotions. And it can be difficult to kind of be vulnerable in that sense and ask for help.
I'm sure with pretty much any avenue you take with therapy or with getting help for depression or anxiety, there's also some type of counseling or talking that goes on during each visit. And during those visits, what are you asking for patients to open up about?
Yeah, there's different types of therapy. And one of the ones that's probably more effective for SAD is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And what you're really wanting to start with is patients telling you what they see as their stressors or what they see as the things contributing towards their depression, and how they view those issues, how they view themselves, what they think their role is within their personal life, their professional life. And you're trying to get a sense of, especially when it comes to depression, how they view themselves, because oftentimes in depression, people have a very negative view of themselves. They often feel like they don't deserve to be happy, and you got to get to the root of that.
I bet that can be hard in itself, just kind of trying to get to the root of where did all this start, or where did your feelings of being anti-self in some way start for you?
Yes, and that takes, a good bit of work in therapy, but therapy plus medications actually, it's additive, so you can get, a boost from one, a boost from the other, but when you do both, you can get a stronger response.
What are some of the things that you have seen that led to this depression? Because I'm curious, is it always a trauma? Is it always, a loss of some kind? Or what is it that usually leads to somebody's depression later in life even?
Well, it can definitely be those things. And I'd say in terms of external forces, those would probably be the biggest ones. Some people just intrinsically have the propensity for depression. And I think it's why you can see it run in families. There's a genetic component to it. And so, the key is doing a thorough history and, exploring a patient's background and finding out, can we identify a reason that this happens? And then also, over time you monitor folks and you can actually see that sometimes everything's going great. There are no identifiable triggers, and yet they slump back into depression.
Again, Dr. Lombardi with us this morning and talking about depression and anxiety and things that impact a lot of folks out there. How many people roughly, or maybe there's a percentage, how many people go through depression at least once in their life here in Tennessee?
Probably a quarter of adults will experience a depressive episode in their life. And, whether it's a question of it's happening with more frequency now or we're just monitoring for it more. But those numbers have been trending up. And as far as the seasonal affective disorder, you can expect maybe about 5% of folks to experience that at some point. And it's important with that to also make sure that those patients aren't, in fact, bipolar patients who haven't been diagnosed yet.
5% is a big number.
5% is a very big number. Yes, it is.
Did the numbers start going up after COVID, or did people just become more aware of problems mentally, throughout our society after COVID?
Well, there's been a lot of media targeting mental health, both from just an awareness standpoint and also from a marketing standpoint since COVID. And I think everybody kind of being isolated and at home a lot, certainly gave them an opportunity to read about those or see ads online for symptoms you may have and treatments that are available. I'm not so sure that the numbers really have drastically changed, but I think people just may be more aware of it in general.
What about when somebody does make that first step or two in getting help? What about joining different groups? Like I know you see different groups at churches where it's almost like group therapy, but it's not led by necessarily somebody who's a professional in the medical field, but they have different groups out there, throughout Tennessee that people can be a part of. Do those things help?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things we're always looking for, especially when someone's in the hospital, right, is enhancing their social support. And that's a perfect way to do it. People's communities, their religious groups, their church groups, these are really vital pieces of the puzzle. And so if you have those groups, lean on them. If you don't have them, consider getting involved.
I guess we're really made for community. I mean, our brain is not wired to be in isolation.
No, it's not. We're very social creatures by nature. And COVID kind of did a number on us in that sense. And so I think we're catching up a little bit with treatment, and there's, other things that people are becoming more aware of in terms of treatments for anxiety and ADHD. Those all are pieces of the puzzle.
ADHD, that's something that we heard a whole lot about in the 90s, and then it just kind of fell off. Are we hearing more about that again today? I mean, are there more diagnoses of people who have ADHD?
There are, and that's probably a topic for an entirely different day as to the reason why. But yes, I mean, the marketing around that has become a very significant issue. A lot of the legislature around the telehealth laws and prescribing those medicines have become a significant issue. But, again, untreated conditions, anxiety is also one of them. You go long enough without being treated, it can also lead to depression.
Depression, though, overall, I mean, that's really a tough one. I mean, let's go back to depression and focus on that for a second here. But that's a tough one to treat just because of the fact that it's hard to even convince people, hey, if you're battling this depression, you need to get out of your house and go somewhere to get some help. So it's tough from the very start. Yeah,
it's sort of ironic. I mean, the condition itself lends itself to being more difficult to treat because when people are depressed, they tend to have decreased energy, decreased motivation. Those are things you actually need to help treat your depression.
So these symptoms of, like you said, decreased energy, that decreased motivation, when you look at the decreased energy, I mean, does it rob you of energy so much to where you literally don't feel like getting out of bed? Because you always hear that as an example. If you don't feel like getting out of bed, you may be depressed. Is it really robbing folks of energy to that extent?
Oh, it is. Yeah. I mean, it could profoundly affect them. You would be shocked. Folks that just basically are not functional. And you can, on a really far end of the spectrum, actually see some people become catatonic, which means they almost become not responsive in general. And there's nothing, quote, medically wrong with them, but psychiatrically, they're quite ill.
It's crazy how something can just literally rob all of your energy. I mean, just to take it away and you feel like you're exhausted, you're tired, but yet you sleep through the night. I mean, it's just, there's so many, I don't understand this one, I don't understand that when you talk about depression.
Other things like, vitamin D are important. So making sure that you have a good balanced diet, making sure that you're getting some sort of sunlight. Again, the light therapy, the light boxes, that's a good alternative, especially if it's really cloudy outside. Exercising. There's something we call behavioral motivation, so picking some activities, even if it's just one a day, something that will get you out of bed, something that you enjoy, that can awaken some sort of interest in you. Those are all things in concert together to help people feel better.
So after you start on this journey to, feeling better, after you start your exercise every day, after you start getting the right vitamins, after you start this path, how long does it take usually for somebody to start feeling like, hey, I feel like getting out of bed today, I feel like going to do something on Saturday?
I mean, for some people, it could be as soon as the end of that week. And people will progressively improve as long as they stick to, these behaviors, these improved behaviors, these new behaviors. People will continue to show improvement in the weeks ahead.
I'm guessing some people just need to hear those words. You can get better. You can have energy again. It's just going to take, these steps. You're going to have to first get up and start walking or just fill in the blank.
Yeah. So, our treatments are actually pretty effective. Both, the kind of the behavioral intervention treatments we talked about, therapy and medication. Depression is a treatable condition. And, at least at Ascension St. Thomas, we've had cases where you would be shocked. I mean, you would think, how are you ever going to get better here? And we do it, and we can do it. And you can get the help you need. I mean, it's treatable. Just the first step, the biggest step is just asking for help.
Are there new medications available today that do work faster than medications that were available, let's say, 5-10 years ago?
There are. There are kind of like dual action medications. One is called Auvelity. So Wellbutrin is an older antidepressant that's actually approved for seasonal affective disorder. And then there's a newer formulation where they combined it with the active ingredient in cough syrup, which sounds a little crazy, but it's actually another powerful antidepressant. So you put the two of them together, and the cough syrup component actually starts working faster. So you can get results, within a week or two, where previously it might have been 4 to 6.
And probably some of the medicines that help with depression, they were built for or made for something else. And then I guess scientists realize, or doctors realize, hey, this also helps make this person feel better. Is that how a lot of them come about?
That's how they certainly used to come about. I guess we're fortunate now that the science has evolved to the point where I think the medications are sort of targeted for a specific fashion from the get-go. So it's not so much, accidental discoveries anymore. But yes, a large part of medicine has been that way.
Are we on the brink of something great being created in the world of medicine to where, let's say, maybe in 1 or 2 years, there's going to be a medicine that really helps right away with depression?
Well, so there are some medicines that actually can work right away. There's always some controversy about some of these newer treatments. But one of them is ketamine, and that can be a very powerful antidepressant. And, there's centers that you can actually go to and have an infusion, and you're monitored. There's IV infusions, there's intranasal infusions, that's called Spravato. But actually people can report an improvement in their treatment-resistant depression even later that day.
Wow.
Later that day. Can you believe that? So, but again, talk to your doctor, do your own research, talk to your family and friends, and just do whatever you're comfortable with as long as you're doing something.
And things like ketamine, they've been used on the battlefield. They've been used in emergency rooms for years and years. And from what I understand, they're fairly safe. When in the right environment, obviously.
In the right environment, with the right medical team administering it, yes. A lot of our medicines also have the potential for misuse or abuse. And so, I was in training, one of my attendings said, the power to heal is the power to harm. And really what that means is if you really want to have an effect from something, the chances are, under the right circumstances, it can definitely heal you. But in order to actually show its power, it could potentially harm you too. So that's why you need a medical professional, your doctor, your nurse practitioner, whoever your PCP or psychiatrist is, in order to monitor your treatment.
When you see different tests that are available out there, and a lot of these tests are advertised online where you send in, saliva, you send in whatever it is, and then they give you back a list of medications that may be perfect for your body type, for your brain, that will work better for you than others, and they give you a list of medications that you probably should avoid. How accurate are those lists? Or have you ever found that a patient brings that with them and you look it over and you then treat based according to that list as far as what medicine to prescribe?
This comes up quite a bit. I would say that it was pretty frequent in my outpatient clinics to have patients come in with those lists. And I think just to kind of dispel the myth a little bit about those lists are mostly looking at how a particular person metabolizes a medication and whether they're a fast or slow metabolizer. And that can obviously affect the levels of the medication in your system. It's really more useful for that, especially if you've had a patient and you've been trying medication after medication and you're like, boy, we're hitting a little bit of a roadblock here. They may have sort of a metabolic abnormality or just a variance of normal. It really doesn't even have to be abnormal. It could just be sort of, in the minority of the population that might be affecting how they respond to a particular medication. It's useful in that sense. It's not so useful in the sense that it tells you this particular medicine will cure my depression.
When you talk about how their body takes in that medication, is it that some people, maybe they absorb it too quickly, it goes right through their system? What is it that we're looking at here?
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes it can be metabolized too quickly, in which cases oftentimes you can increase the dose so that, maybe, I'm just throwing out a number, but maybe, 150 milligrams for you is effective, but for me, I need 300 milligrams. And then, the inverse can happen where they're a slow metabolizer. So in fact, they could actually end up having more side effects initially than you would have expected at a lower dose. And then that can cause some barriers to treatment because they can say, hey, listen, I'm not tolerating this medication well.
And again, we're talking about depression this morning and seasonal affective disorder and a lot of the different, conditions that people find out about or learn that they may be diagnosed with around this time of year. But we're going to take a short break. And again, with us today, Dr. Christopher Lombardi. Stay with us. We do have more to come in just a minute.
The Action Line on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna. Listen and watch at WGNSradio.com.
At Bud's Tire Pros, we sell all major brands of tires, and we invite you to stop by today for that next set of tires. Or maybe you need us to check out your vehicle before you head out of town. We offer everything from brakes to batteries, alignments, and more. No appointments necessary, just stop on by.
I'm Allison Mitchell with Bud's Tire Pros. We're located on East Main Street, exactly 3 miles from the town square, 1 mile past Rutherford Boulevard. Visit us online at budstirepros.tn.com.
We're powered by Middle Tennessee Electric. From everyone at MTE, here's wishing you a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. May your holiday season be as bright and warm as the community MTE serves. Happy holidays from Middle Tennessee Electric.
This is Peter Demas from Demas's Restaurant. Our family wants to wish you a Merry Christmas. Christmas is about an incredible act of love to be treasured every day of the year. It's about the sacrifice that God made for us, sending His Son to this world as a man to redeem us from our sins. In Luke chapter 2, verses 10 and 11, the angels proclaimed, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord." Merry Christmas from Demas's Restaurant.
Hi, this is Dan at Music World and Drummers Den. We have new things going on here for Christmas. We have gift cards available for any amount from $1 up to whatever you want to spend on it. We have Christmas specials going on. Our prices are competitive. Sometimes we're even below the online prices. We have layaway plans available, and this is real popular at Christmas. Music World and Drummers Den, 2762 South Church, right across the street from Indian Hills Golf Course.
We're excited to announce that Capstar Bank is now officially a division of Old National Bank. The friends you've made while banking right here over the years are still here, and so are those delicious, warm, homemade cookies. Everything you enjoyed about Capstar is still at Old National Bank.
In Murfreesboro at 2230 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard.
Come on over and enjoy warm cookies with friends while doing your banking at Old National Bank.
Old National Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
The Action Line on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna. Listen and watch at WGNSradio.com.
In studio, we have Dr. Chris Lombardi with Physician St. Thomas Rutherford. And again, before we talk a whole lot more about depression and everything around that, if somebody does need to get help, they feel like they need to get help, what is one of those first steps?
So if they're in an emergency, if you're having any suicidal thoughts, definitely call 911. 911 is equipped. They have a whole dedicated mental health team to address people going through those crises. But, if you're not having symptoms that severe, but are suffering from depression or any other mental health condition, it's really reaching out again to your doctor or reaching out to us at Ascension St. Thomas, whatever Ascension St. Thomas hospital is nearest you.
Let's look at some of the different things that could lead to depression, or maybe some of the different topics you hear people talk about, and maybe that's the loss of a loved one, maybe it's a divorce, but what are some of those big items that do come up, especially during the holidays?
I think those are the two biggest. I think you hit the nail on the head. ritually, the holidays are very important to us. And rituals are really mile markers in our lives. And it gives our lives structure. It helps us kind of tell the story of our lives. It's important to who we, see ourselves as people. And when you lose a core element of that, which is a loved one, it can be very difficult to adapt. One of the things that's important to do is try to keep up certain traditions. If you lost a loved one and the holidays roll around, there's something that you always try to do together. Try to keep that alive. And conversely, I think it's also important, just as we go forward and grow and move on, to also introduce new traditions.
If you lost a loved one, a death in the family, or let's say it's a divorce, because those two things are closely tied together in a lot of ways, I guess, because you're both experiencing a loss in some way. But that whole starting a new tradition, that may take you 3, 4, 5 Christmases to really get in the groove of figuring out what the start of that new tradition may be. And I guess that's okay, because there's no rule book on how you go about loss and how you go about figuring out what to do next.
People need time, and we live in kind of a instant gratification culture. And unfortunately, sometimes the answer is time, but you can accelerate it. You can decide, hey, listen, I know we always did X, Y, or Z, but this year we're going to go to Florida. We're going to do something different, or a different activity. And then some of that is that behavioral motivation. We talked about the same thing as if you're really depressed. It's like, I have to get up today and do one thing I love doing. And if you do that enough, eventually the depression will subside, and you'll start forgetting about how bad you felt, and you'll start thinking about how good you feel now.
How dangerous is it, or maybe it's not at all, to ignore those feelings after a loss, or to ignore those, that grief, and instead push through it and say to myself, well, I'm going to focus on the holiday. I'm going to focus on friends coming over. What is the right way, wrong way when it comes to that ignoring certain feelings?
Grief is a very normal process for us. If you found that your grief is really extending, certainly beyond 12 months, that may be the time when you sit down with a professional. But also, if you find that your grief even immediately is either making you feel suicidal or is causing a significant impairment in your functionality, you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your kids, you're not doing well at work, then you would actually want to sit down and get some help earlier.
That not being able to get things done, that feeling of not maybe being on the same level at work, all of those things, those are tough problems. But sometimes, is it hard for people to recognize, hey, I am having a struggle here, or do they recognize that right away? Because it's hard to see things in yourself at times.
A lot of times it's actually family and close friends bringing folks into the hospital. It also works on the back end too, is that in my opinion, a lot of family and friends are the ones who notice improvement in patients before the patients themselves do. And they can say, hey, listen, I met with Jim, for example, and boy, he's looking so much brighter. He's sounding so much better. And he himself may actually not even see the change yet. So it's those around us actually who notice both, maybe the depression first, and also the lifting of the depression first.
So when those around us say, hey, you seem like you're doing a lot better, maybe they don't say it in those words, but when they say things that make you think, I must be doing a little better, how hard is it to believe those sentences, those statements from others?
Yeah, it can be challenging sometimes, but I think also it can be rewarding when people start to see that, they are performing better, they are looking better, because people do like to be functional, they like to be productive. So I think it's important just to still also listen to, the person, listen to the patient. And if they feel like they still have a long way to go, listen to that and address it and help them.
And I'm sure people want to feel better. They just don't know how to go about doing that.
They do. And, the world is becoming increasingly complex. And there's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of information. Sometimes it can be very overwhelming, and you think, where do I turn to first? We have more resources now than ever, and it can still be difficult. So again, just starting with your family and friends, or starting with your doctor, and that's all you need to do.
Social media. Do you ever talk to patients about, hey, it may not be a great idea to start talking about every emotion you're feeling on social media. That may come back to hurt you in some way, or maybe it is a great idea. I don't know.
Well, I think I read that Australia just moved to ban social media for minors. So, there's pretty compelling evidence that it can do a lot of harm. There are obviously benefits to it, As a personal kind of aside here, not very heavy into social media, I think one of the dangers is it can definitely distort your perception of reality, both, how you're doing and then how you're doing in relation to other people.
I guess for me, at least growing up, I never thought we live in a society where we focus so heavily on putting our feelings online or putting what we bought yesterday out there for the whole community to see. It's just kind of a strange time we live in.
It is. And, I think one of the things that social media is very effective at is basically tapping into a lot that drives us. So whether it's both that, communal aspect, that need for contact, it can also play into need for attention. And those things can lead people to do things that, might not actually be the brightest of ideas.
If people are posting stuff on social media and they're feeling almost a euphoric high of some sort when they see that people commented on whatever it is they said or they liked it, at what point do we say, well, this feeling's getting a little too strong, maybe I should step back? And because, those feelings can also lead to, I guess, depression when they don't receive those same endorsements or statements from others.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of interpersonal conflicts that can occur over social media. I think everybody kind of has seen those posts where you wonder, boy, would that person have said that to them?
Probably not.
To their face, probably not. And, tying your sense of self-worth to likes or clicks is a bit of a perilous path.
Well, I know we're almost out of time here. We've kind of gotten all over the place or gone all over the place. But with things like depression, with a seasonal affective disorder, with any type of pain that you're suffering mentally throughout the holidays, it is a good idea to get some type of help. And once more, at what level do we say, well, I need to go to the doctor? Or what level do we say, I think I'll just call a friend?
So again, if you're having any suicidal thoughts, those are an emergency. You should reach out immediately, either 911, go to the nearest emergency room. You can call a family member that you trust, but you got to basically take action immediately. But if you're not having those thoughts, but you are profoundly depressed, if you're noticing an impact in your life, a decrease in your functionality, not meeting your obligations, or you're sleeping too much, or you're gaining too much weight, or you're drinking too much, those are signs and symptoms of needing to get help, and we can help you.
Again, Dr. Christopher Lombardi with us this morning, of Cision St. Thomas Rutherford, right here in Murfreesboro. And I guess you can just maybe even call the hospital to figure out, hey, where do I turn next? Or should I come in? Or what should I do? But I guess that's a starting point there, too.
That's where it starts.
Thank you for joining us this morning.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
The Action Line on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna. Listen and watch at WGNSradio.com.